All right, welcome everyone to the first ever No Bad Questions podcast. My guest today, and kind enough to be the first ever, is Shay Eskew. Shay is an All-American, Ironman All-World ranked triathlete, a healthcare rev cycle strategist, a former black bear researcher, a burn survivor with scars over 65% of his body, motivational speaker, and best-selling author of What the Fire Ignited. At the age of 8, Shay was set afire by a neighbor's child and credited with saving the life of his 7-year-old friend. Despite being told he'd never play sports again, enduring over 37 surgeries the last 39 years, Shay is a 44-time Ironman 70.3 athlete, 4 times member of Team USA, ranked top 1% of Ironman worldwide the past 6 years, and has competed in 14 triathlon world championships in 9 countries on 6 continents, including the Ironman World Championships in Kona, Hawaii. Additionally, Shay is a sponsored triathlete of Newton Running and an inaugural cohort of exceptional service-oriented athletes known as the Malama Club, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, long-standing members of the Ironman Foundation Ambassador Team. In 2019, Shay was inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame under the Medal of Courage designation and into the McEachern High School Athletic Hall of Fame. Equally impressive, and in my opinion, perhaps most important, Shay is the proud father of 5 children. Shay, thanks for being here.
My honor. Thanks, David. I appreciate you inviting me on your show, bud.
So, what is an Ironman, and what does it take to become one?
So an Ironman is a 2.4-mile swim with 3,000 of your closest friends. Then you do a 112-mile unassisted bike ride, and then you run a 26.2-mile marathon, all within 17 hours.
And so that sounds grueling is probably the nicest word. Why Ironman? What made you decide I need to do this? And not only do I need to do it, I need to be, the best at it.
Yeah, so it's
one
funny.
Of the best.
It's funny when you talk to people in Ironman, it's a calling, right? Everybody in the sport has a story, whether it's you're trying to get in shape, reclaim your health, you're battling cancer, you lost a loved one, divorce, maybe you had an addiction to alcohol or drugs. For me, it was back in 2008. I was working out in a gym in a big high-rise downtown Atlanta. At the time, I was 33, and a 65-year-old barrel-chested man walks up to me and he goes, "Hey, tough guy." And I preface this by saying I was 45 pounds heavier than what I am today. And he goes, "Hey, tough guy." And I said, "You talking to me?" He said, "Yeah, I'm talking to you." He goes, "Why don't you come here and do my little boot camp class? It's just me and a bunch of ladies. Shouldn't be anything for a guy like you with all your muscles." Right? I should have saw he was setting me up, but my ego took over and I was like, whatever, old timer. So we get in there. True to form was all women. I was the only guy in there. And in 10 minutes, I'm in tears because all we're doing is core exercises, planks, leg lifts. In the last 5 minutes, this guy drops down beside me and goes, 4 count push-ups. And he starts calling them out. 1, 2, 3, 1. 1, 2, 3, 2. I can't keep up with him. And then he goes, "Eskew, ponytails is kicking your butt. You better pick it up, boy." And all I could say was, "Yes, sir." I was so embarrassed. I went home and told my wife I got my butt handed to me by a 65-year-old man. So I showed back up for class the next day. What I didn't know at the time is this guy was one of the original Ironmen from 1978, Marine drill sergeant. He had also completed the Ironman at 62, and the guy ran 8 to 10 miles a day. I mean, he was a machine. And so I spent the next 2 months getting back into what I call fighting shape. And it was during that time, Henry Forrest, got diagnosed stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And so long story short, he made it a year. But right before he passed, a group of us met with him. We said, Henry, we're going to do the next big triathlon. We don't care the distance. We're going to do it. And so a group of us signed up for an Ironman 70.3, which is a half Ironman. And so we had like 3 to 4 months to prepare. I didn't own a bike, so I bought a $500 bright green road bike off Craigslist. Hadn't ran since high school. Hated running, absolutely hated it. It had never swam. I've never done like a freestyle swim stroke. So I had to get lessons. And then after the race, we're all sitting around celebrating, having a beer. And so one of the guys in the group goes, let's do the same race twice, the full Ironman 5 months from today. So I went home that night and signed up. Nobody else did. And fast forward, the day before the race, I ran into Henry's daughter. And she said, Shay, you know, Daddy's going to be watching you tomorrow. I said, I know. And she goes, no, I mean it. You know, this is the 1 year anniversary of Daddy passing away, race day. And it just kind of set that in motion. So it's been, 14 years now. Done, now over 44 of these events. Just got back from racing at one in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, a couple of days ago.
Beautiful, yeah.
Man, and it's amazing. And I tell everybody, because they said, I could never do that. I said, really? Have you tried? Have you physically put in training and tried one? Or have you just convinced yourself you could never do it? And I said, I guarantee you, if you stood at that finish line, you watch these people crawl, stumble, do whatever it takes to get across that finish line, and you see all the varying body types and disabilities, you'd sign up that night. You'd say, if they can do it, I can do it. And that's what's so amazing about it. It's a sport where it's not about who's the fastest. It's about who slows down the least. And it's just about getting across the finish line, which to me is about life in general, right? It's doing whatever it takes for as long as it takes to get across that finish line. So if you want to sum it up, it's I drank the punch. I'm all in. It's been a lifestyle change and extremely thankful for it.
So what's interesting to me about that story, well, there's a number of interesting things about that story, but for the sake of time, we'll focus on the idea of it took that single moment, and I think a lot of people would just take the ego bruising and go back to doing whatever they were doing in the gym, in the hotel gym or whatever. They're not going to engage to the point you did where it became a 14-year lifestyle change, right? And so what I wonder, do you think, is there an inherent personality element that you have that made you say, I got to do this, I want to do this? Because you mentioned, anybody who would see these folks coming across the finish line would want to, or do you think you've got something unique, or do you have something that is not unique, but that you had to build, in your personality, a competitiveness, a resilienceness, whatever you want to call it, but did you have to work at it?
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody. Like, I'm one of those people, I'm motivated by challenges. Nothing gets me more fired up than somebody saying, you can't do this, and being convinced about it, right? Like, I live to prove people wrong. Right or wrong, that's just the way I'm wired. However, had that moment not happened, there's no way I would have signed up for an Ironman because just wasn't on the radar, right? It was too crazy. Right. I couldn't visualize how to get it done. But I think for so many of us, there is that wake-up moment in our life. I've had several of them, right? I've lost everything financially. And it's what I call the mirror test. It's when you look in the mirror and you say, all right, no more excuses. I'm going to do whatever it takes to turn things around. And I think many of us, we've had those discussions with ourselves. Some of us answer the call to duty.
Mm-hmm.
Others of us give in and feel sorry for ourselves. And it's just trying to figure out, like, who are you, right? Are you the type person that's going to do whatever it takes? Are you the type person that, hey, this is too hard, I guess it wasn't meant to be? And honestly, I've been fortuitous enough to have people enter into my life at strategic moments. For me, I believe it's divine. I believe there's people that are placed in our life daily. If we take the time to kind of really reflect on and say, hey, what if I do this? What would my new life look like?
Mm-hmm.
It changes everything. But so many times we just dismiss it as a casual occurrence. Hey, this is too much work. I'm going to just stay on the current course I'm on.
And so I think we can all see evidence of that. Just pause there, and whether individuals take that as a matter of faith or luck or chance or good positioning in your career or networking, whatever. But I think most of us could probably agree that, yeah, there's those injections of important people along the way that can really help us, right? And certainly for me, I think that's where you need to be open to listening, right? If you're too caught up in your own headspace to listen to those folks, you may not get as many wins or whatever you want to call it along the way as if you're just willing to listen. That doesn't always mean you have to do what those folks say, but you at least be open to listen, right?
And I can tell you, David, and you know this, we all know it with empirical evidence. When you read every success story, there's always been one person that had a huge impact on them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken action. We've all had those encounters. Some of us chose to do nothing with it. But I can't name a single person that can say they've never met somebody that was pretty successful. And it's having that courage to ask them, what advice do you have? What did you do? Right? And that's why I really go out of my way to try to spend time with people like that. Because I realize the more time I spend with them, I'm going to start picking up some of their habits.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just learning like what things are occurring in daily life that I'm not seizing the opportunity. Like I'm a big believer in RAS. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but
No, can you break that down?
yeah. So RAS is reticular activation system. This is a process your brain goes through every single second of your life. And it's basically a built-in filter that your brain has to bring you more of what you want as opposed to what you don't want. But the key is convincing your brain, hey, this is what I want to see. So if you're a pessimistic person, your brain is going to be looking for reinforcements every single day. Hey, look, that person just ran you off the road. Hey, look, your coffee just spilled, right? These are things reinforcing your belief. But if you start training your RAS and looking at obstacles as opportunities, you're going to start seeing these silver linings to the things that are misfortunate in your life. That makes sense?
Yeah.
And it's one of those, so an example I give people is, how does RAS work? For instance, if you're in an airport, they're calling names nonstop, right? But as soon as they say, David Kelly, you left your bag in security, you're like, what? Who just called me?
Mm-hmm.
So your brain filters out all the names that aren't important. But as soon as it says your name, it says,
Right.
hey, this is important to you. Just like when you buy a new car, all of a sudden you start noticing everybody has this car on the road, right? And those cars have
Very
been
true.
there, but they had no particular importance to you, so your brain filtered them out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, like, I read a ton of books on adversity, a ton of books on stories of rags to riches, and what I'm doing is training my brain. What things did they encounter in their life that contributed to their success? And so when I start seeing these things in my life, I said, hey, this is what Howard Schultz saw, right? Hey, this is what Warren Buffett did, whatever it is,
Right.
right? And you just kind of build that into your repertoire, and your brain is reinforcing daily, hey, look at this, pursue this. This could be something very special.
How early did you, you burned at 8,
Right?
right? Like, I can't imagine, my oldest isn't quite 8. And bouncing back from that, how early did you start this focus on the positive, or did you have to spend years getting to where you are now? Or were you just, you came out this way?
I would say, I've always been kind of a happy-go-lucky, positive outlook. My dad reinforces that. But for me, the kind of turning moment was, I'll never forget. So lying in that ICU room, you're surrounded by 7 other severely burned kids.
Hmm.
And I'm on a ward where everybody in there's probably 30 something of us, all severely burned kids. And the more I looked around at the room and I saw the disfigurements, I saw the impairment of these kids, I said, look, I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to live a full life. I don't want to be known as a burn survivor. And I didn't want to be even identified as a burn survivor, right? I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be identified as a normal kid that had some challenges. But also, I saw so many of these kids that were extremely happy. Like, I'll never forget, there was this, she was probably 5-year-old. A lighter had blown up in her face, and it
Oh.
had melted her chin to her chest. But man, this girl, every time I saw her, she was smiling.
Hmm.
I was like, if she's smiling with everything she's dealing with, how could I dare not smile?
Right.
Right? And that probably had the bigger impact, was realizing no matter how bad something you're going through is, somebody's got it worse. And they're not only surviving, but they're thriving. And so it's just having that sense of perspective and always saying, hey, it could be worse. I know this may
Right.
seem pretty bad to me right now, but it could always be worse.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, because that's a tool I've used a few times. Is I take the so I years ago, I think it was Matt Damon, some celebrity was involved with a charity regarding clean water in Africa. And so I went down a pathway of learning about that, and, kind of getting out of my Americanized bubble to learn about what some folks in some parts of the world have to go through to get clean water, right?
On a daily
Walking
basis.
3 miles a day with a bucket, or whatever. And what I try to do, not always successfully, is, if you're having a bad moment, particularly if it's a bad moment that's trivial, sort of a non-serious, somebody, the line's too long at the DMV or something like that, remind yourself that at least you're not walking to get your water.
Right? Yeah.
And
I
so,
tell, we
yeah, go
have
ahead.
discussions in our house. We've got 5 kids under 16, and we definitely have our moments, right? There's definitely times you're like, I'm going to kill them. You guys are driving me crazy. And then I have to always stop and say, look, how many people that have lost a kid, how many people that have a kid with special needs or can never even have kids would love to have 5 bratty kids,
Right.
right? And so you have to remind yourself that in those moments, it's good that you have kids that have the ability to act up and do the dumb things that they do,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. And I'm sure every parent out there is probably relating if they're listening to this right now. So, um, so, okay. So you're this, just gone on this 14-year journey as sort of I'll call it a subpart of your 39-year journey, and becoming Mr. Resilience in a lot of ways. Have there been moments either within the 39 or within the 14-year that jump out at you as you kind of lost the drive, lost the faith, lost the momentum, or have you been able to keep it constant?
So there's different things. I would say financially, there was definitely a time where I lost the drive, and Ironman honestly kind of helped pull me out of that.
Mm.
When the housing boom happened, or the crash in 2008, we were one of those victims. Like, the value of our house dropped over in half. Crime surged in our neighborhood. There were 2 attempted rapes, and I said, "Look, we're getting out of here."
Oh, wow.
Right? Um, we thought we had a short sale worked out with the bank. The last minute, they decided not to and foreclosed on us. My income suddenly dropped 35%. At the time, I had 3 kids, and I was like, what am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to suck my pride up, and we moved in with my mother-in-law. So we spent
Mm-hmm.
3 years living with her, but I was able to rebuild, my financial stability. Um, I'll never forget going to meet a bunch of my fraternity brothers, having a beer. I'm driving a 10-year-old paid off SUV. It's a GMC Jimmy. And I'll never forget one of my fraternity brothers, who used to be a roommate of mine, came up to me and said, Shay, how does it feel living with your mother-in-law driving that car? He goes, I never thought I'd see this day. And I looked at him, I took a second and said, you know what? I said, I'm okay with it because this is temporary. I know where I'm going. Just kind of let it be at that. I was able to 10x my income in the next 6 years.
Mm.
And that night was the moment of it, right? And I just kept having to reaffirm myself, hey, you've got a plan. Don't let everybody else derail you. There's always going to be naysayers. There's always people going to question the path you're on, but they don't understand your journey. And so you can't listen to them. They haven't experienced what you have in life. There's people all the time that tell me, Shay, I can't believe you waste all your time training. I don't see it as wasting,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's therapy for me. I've got to see the world, do things I never thought were possible. And sadly, this same guy wound up dying, 4 years ago from substance abuse.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's tragic, right? But I reflect on it several times a year, saying things change quickly, and we can never get comfortable where we are in life, and there's no shortcuts, and that's what so many people want. Hey, if I do this, can I see an improvement in 3 months? You'll see an improvement, but it's not life changing.
Right.
Right? If you want to change your lifestyle, I mean, that's a commitment that takes years.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't take overnight. Um, but, physically, I've had some moments just because I've had so many surgeries. I had 2 big surgeries this year. One of them was an 8-hour surgery that for 6 weeks I wasn't allowed to turn my head. For 6 weeks I wasn't allowed to lift my arms over my head. I could only lift them up to 90 degrees. I couldn't lift more than 3 pounds. I was very humbled again during this process because 2 months before the surgery, I was racing in Israel, completing my 6th continent. So I went from being in excellent fitness to the worst fitness I had been in 14 years.
Oh, wow.
Like my heart rate would just skyrocket just walking down the hallway because the surgery was just so traumatic in the amount of anesthesia I was under.
Hmm.
But 6 weeks later, I was starting to see big signs, starting to feel really good about it. And then I took my dog on a bike ride. And I won't go into the whole story, but long story short, had a bike wreck, broke my collarbone, had to get a plate and screws put in my collarbone. And that surgeon had to call my original surgeon, and they had to talk together to make sure that he didn't undo the surgery I just had 6 weeks prior.
Right.
So there was 3 months there that it was pretty frustrating that knowing, hey, you're finally back up again. And then you had to start over.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, but for me, it was so symbolic of life in general. Just when you think you've made it, life is going to knock you back down. There's no true I've made it moment. Everything's temporary. And so we got to always be ready to keep doing whatever it takes to keep getting back up the mountain.
And wow, so a lot inside of there. I appreciate you sharing those stories with us. And the quote that you said to your friend, it's temporary. Do you write out your long-term goals? Do you put them in a journal, in a diary, in a notebook? Do you just emblazon them in your brain space? Like you told him you knew where you were going. How did you know that? Just positive visualization or literally writing stuff down?
All the above. So I've got a whiteboard in my pain cave, which is my home gym. And so on this whiteboard, I've got my fitness goals and then my career goals written down on that, where I want to be. One of the things that has really helped me, especially now I'm 48, but back when I was, early 40s, somebody had shared with me the statistic that the role you're in at 50, statistically, is the role that you retire in.
Mm-hmm.
And having that kind of timeline, I was like, wow, really? Man, I got to start making some changes. Again, I was doing well financially, but from a position level and where I wanted to be in my 50s and 60s, I had to make some changes to get more leadership experience.
Right.
So I walked away from the highest paying job I ever had because I knew there was no senior leadership opportunities there, and they made it clear to me there wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to start over from an income basis to get that senior level experience. But I knew to be where I wanted to be at 50, this is what it would take. And so now at 48, I've gotten the experience I've needed. And the things I wanted to start achieving at 50 already started coming through. Like one of those was getting asked to be an advisor on boards. I felt I could contribute to companies as it relates to sales. And so I wanted to sit on boards and be a strategic member to help them determine the best path in procuring sales.
So there's a through line in some of your stories of braveness, if you want to call it that, a willingness to embrace the uncomfortable, perhaps would be another way to phrase it. Stepping away from a high paying job to the implication being a lower paying job to meet long-term career goals, to go to this 65-year-old's clinic, and embrace the unknown there, to go to the half Ironman when you and your friends had never done one. These all, scream at me a willingness to take a leap, if you will. And I think that's what a lot of folks, myself included, struggle with. Any words of wisdom or advice for learning to embrace that? You've talked about embracing other personality elements that could help, but what about that embracing the unknown, embracing the uncomfortable?
It's one of those, David, like inherently we have an aversion to risk, right? Some more than others. And like my dad is extremely risk adverse, and we were business partners for years, and there's some things he just would never do. And so I would just make decisions, say, look, I made it easy on you. You have no choice now. Sink or swim. So I've always been a pretty adventurous person. Like I took a job at 22 trapping bears for a living. I spent 6 months living in the woods, $75 a week. And all I could think about, who wouldn't want to do this? What an incredible experience. Right? Like I could just envision later, 40s and 50s sitting around the campfire, which is what we do now. Hey, remember back, in early 90s when you were trapping bears and you got to work with the wolves? And so my life has been very focused on experiences because I believe if I pursue the experience, money, happiness, and all that will come. Like, don't go chasing the dollar because then you'll be empty. But if I'm chasing an experience that I know offers excitement, it's going to make me happy because I'll feel challenged. I'll be fulfilled because I'm going to pick up new skill sets. I'm going to do something that most people wouldn't do. Like I get very excited taking on things that most people wouldn't do. I feel like getting burned kind of triggered that in my head that, look, I realized I'm not the most talented person, but I'm very gritty and persevere through hard times. And so if I seek out experiences that reward that kind of mindset, I'm going to do well in those. That's why I wrestled. That's why I boxed. I think it's why I've enjoyed Ironman, because it's hard. It's challenging. It's not who's the best athlete. It's who can go the longest and withstand the most amount of pain, right? That's what's gotten me excited. So I just been drawn to those kind of things. What I'm also a big believer in is when you meet somebody that's successful, that has a track record, and they present you with an opportunity, you have to take it. You have to. Doesn't always work out. I've been on the losing end of those, right? I've been with companies that went bankrupt. I've also been with some very successful ones. And so I don't want to be the person that at the end of my life says, man, I wished I would have. Right? I really believe it's at the end of your days, we'll regret the things we didn't do as opposed to the things we did. And that's one of the things, like back in 2003, my father and I bought an automotive distribution company. Like, I did not want to do it. Everything about me said this is a horror. Not 2001. We bought it July 3rd, 2001. Everything about it said this is a horrible idea. But my dad always wanted to own it. He had been an employee there 32 years.
Is this like a dealer, or is this
No, it's a
distribution?
So we were a distribution. So we sold to repair shops. We sold to automotive dealerships. We also sold to Delta. Over 50% of our business was airline related, selling them brake parts. But all I could think about is here my dad has spent 32 years dreaming of this, of owning this. This guy has given me everything in life that he could give me, right?
Right.
Didn't have money, but gave me love, time, support. I was like, how could I not do this? What a small payback. So I liquidated everything I owned to buy this. He didn't have any money. And so I liquidated everything I had, sold all my stocks, everything. Moved, and we did it. We bought it July 3rd. 2 months later, 9/11 hit.
Right.
Delta sent me a letter. We're not paying you for 6 months. At the end of 6 months, we'll start paying what we bought 6 months before. But we still want to keep buying from you, but we're not going to pay you. So we had no choice. We had to do it.
Right.
I had to go without a paycheck for 6 months. I got a job at Home Depot working on hardware at night, stocking shelves. And here's what's so crazy, David. So probably 4 months into this new business ownership, wondering what the hell did we just do? I grabbed this big industry magazine that we always get. I read the stories, but something told me to look at the classifieds. I don't know why, but I read the classifieds. There was a 1-inch ad, SBA 9/11 disaster relief loan. Guaranteed 2.9% for 20 years. Applied, we got it. It saved the company. Right? We still doubled sales that year. We tripled sales by year 3. We had a successful exit 2008, September 12th, 2 weeks before the market crashed. Right? And my dad and I, we talk about it. And I said, Dad, we didn't get rich. We definitely didn't really make a lot of money. But you now have no regrets. Like, you went for it. And to me, that's what life's about. Like, I would have hated for him in retirement now to always think, what if we'd have done that? What if we'd have bought it? And that's the way I try to live my life. So when I see things and I know one day I may regret this, I try to do it.
Do you think, I know you're not a psychologist by background, but I'll ask you this anyway, just because of the evidence in your personality. Do you think that doing hard things, doing things that take that willingness to embrace the unknown, reinforces the willingness to embrace the unknown? Is it a loop that you can put your brain into by undertaking the behavior? Do you believe?
Absolutely. You know, there's several schools of thought on it. So number one, this is part of that RAS training I was telling you about, right? You're training your brain. Hey, I'm designed for this. I thrive on this. And it becomes self-fulfilling because you start picking out things that you know will contribute to you being successful. But there's also a certain element to when you're voluntarily seeking these things out, as opposed to waiting for life to thrust them upon you, it's a whole different mindset. And so now I have all this experience of doing hard things. I have the confidence of knowing I can do them. The first time around, you struggle with it. I'll never forget. I worked for a venture-backed company when I was in grad school, finishing up my MBA, and we had a PhD psychologist on our board. And one of the things he said, when we look at investing in startups, we like to invest in startups that have at least lost everything once, if not twice.
Hmm.
I said, really? You wouldn't rather have somebody that's had a great track record? He said, ultimately, yes. But we know you learn more from the disappointments than you do from the success.
That's
Because the
interesting.
successes will bias you and you think, hey, everything's this easy. But when you lose it all, you realize what it takes. You realize how to claw back and do whatever it takes to rebuild it. And
Hmm.
that's one of the things that I feel like I've been fortunate. I've got a phenomenal wife that no matter how tough times have gotten, she's never questioned me or us, right? And when you have somebody that has your back and reinforces, hey, I love you, I'll always love you, we'll get through this, you can do it. But if you're on opposite ends and you keep pointing fingers at each other, you can't get any momentum. And that's what I look for. So I'm a big believer in trying to align yourself with a team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't join a company because they got an awesome product. I look more at the team because I
Interesting.
know a team can overcome challenges because there's going to be hard times. Every company, right, is going to encounter something. And if you got a great product but the team stinks, they're going to collapse and give in. But if you've got an okay product and a great team, you know they're going to keep working harder to make the product or service that much better.
So that's interesting. So you're relatively senior in your career at this point. Prior to that, if you're the average person out there today trying to assess the employer's team, in 2 or 3 interviews, right? Like that's tough. Any advice to somebody like, because I think the team thing and the company culture is great advice to look for that as much as or more than the work or the product or the widget, whatever the case is. It's the individuals you're going to work with. Any advice for somebody who perhaps maybe at a different seniority level than you, to figure that out as they're interviewing with an
Yeah.
organization?
I would ask them, what exposure will I have to senior level decision making? And you do it under the auspice. Look, I don't expect you to ask me my advice or even let me weigh in. Can I just sit in the room and hear you guys debate it out? And that's what I've done. I've taken several jobs. I took one where I worked for free for 3 months. I'll never forget it. This guy had a multifamily development company, very successful. I already had my MBA. I owned that distribution company. He said, Shay, I'm not hiring. We don't have the money to hire anybody. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. How about I'm going to come work for you for 3 months for free. I'll bring my own laptop, my own cell phone. I'll travel my own nickel.
Hmm.
In return, you have to take me to every meeting. You have to introduce me to the people you're doing business with. I want to see every piece of it. And I put this in a letter to him, and I said,
And how old were you at that time?
at this time I was 30. Let's see, this is not probably.
So not like 25
No,
straight
no,
out
no,
of
no. I
college
was
or something
probably
like
maybe
that.
like
Okay.
30. I was maybe 31,
Okay.
right? I think I was 31 or 30. I was 30 or 31. And I said, what's the downside to you? Nothing. You're getting MBA for free, all this. Oh, there is one. I may become known as the face man in the company, but hopefully you can live with that. And so this guy responded back to me in a letter. Mr. Eskew, that is quite a proposition. Most people pay a hefty education for this kind of tuition. Pay a hefty tuition for this kind of education. In lieu of your proposal, I believe we can work out a scholarship. He's just being very witty, right, in his
Right.
response. So I started the next week. 3 months later, they hired me full time as their director of development. Eventually became senior director. Um, But it was one of those because I was willing to take a risk, right? And the guy lived up to it, and I held him to it. I went to every meeting. I learned so much. And I think that's the key. Like, if you could learn how the big deals are made, the money's irrelevant. You're going to make the money. It's that experience that you can't pick up in a classroom, that you can't pick up doing data entry and filing and the menial tasks that you do to prove yourself, right? And so that's what I look for. It's just, hey, look, let me go. Can I sit in a board meeting? I'll sit in the corner. I promise I won't say a word, but just let me observe so I can take all that in to prepare me down the road. But it's looking at, too, what is the background of the people you're going to be working with? So one of the things I did, when I was fresh out of undergrad, after the bear trapping, I went to work for one of the largest environmental consulting firms in the world. At the time it was called Dames and Moore, now it's called URS. What I noticed, the senior level managers and directors would get there early. They'd get there at 7:30, and they'd all sit in the break room drinking coffee, talking business, sharing stories. I didn't drink coffee. So I had to learn how to drink coffee so I could fit in, right? And so I asked them, I said, hey, look, can you make me a cup of coffee correctly, right? And they put their sugar in. And so that was my start of drinking coffee, because I wanted so bad just to sit in there with them and just not look obnoxious because I didn't have a cup of coffee to fit in.
It's a good thing they weren't smokers.
But I mean, it's just little things like that, right? Maybe it's you become a connoisseur of drinking a bourbon or a wine. I don't know. But I was willing to go in there. Again, I wasn't drinking mass quantities, but just being able to sip on the coffee to partake in it, because I didn't want to stand out where I was drawing attention to myself. And again, everybody in there was at least double my age. And that's one of the things too. Like, for instance, I highly suggest this. So when we moved to Nashville, 2010, I joined Rotary. I was by far the youngest person in that Rotary group. And so every week I took somebody to lunch. Just wanted to know their story, right? Here I was, 35, taking people 60 to 75 out to lunch every week. I wasn't selling anything. I just said, look, I just want to get your advice. Tell me how you became successful. And so much so, they loved it. The oldest people would have me come sit at their table every week for Rotary. Just a way to set yourself apart, because there was nobody my age in there trying to learn from the past generations on what they did to make it.
I think that's kind of a funny and touching story for a couple of reasons. I was in Rotary for a couple of years, and I was not the youngest, but it certainly the branch that I was in certainly edged towards an older audience, we'll say. But the other reason that's story's interesting to me is I had a professor in undergrad who really emphasized that everyone has a story. Everyone. You might have to dig to find it, right? But everybody has a story. And I think that could go back to what we were talking about earlier about listening, right? Being open to listening to people, because nobody's lived your life. Not the precise pathway and background and culture and upbringing that you've had. But people may have had moments that are pretty identical, right? Or certainly similar, and give you some input that can help you through some of those moments. So I think that's really cool that you were getting out there and trying to listen and learn. And that's part of what I'm trying to do here with this podcast, is just pull the stories out of folks so I can get that opportunity to learn. And then by sharing it as a podcast, get other people that opportunity. So it's really interesting that you took that approach.
Too, David, because I couldn't agree more. Everybody's got a story. And in that same vein, when we're sharing, we're not comparing stories, right?
Right.
And so many people think, oh, you're trying to one up. No, it's just I've always grown up, that's how we communicate. We tell stories.
Right.
Like we take so much joy in hearing people recount the glory days, tell about the dumb things they did and how they survived childhood despite the crazy things they did. But you're also building that repository of grit and learning, hey, like one of the guys, he was a poor Mississippi farmer. And just hearing what he went through, I file that away so I know certain situations, I'll think about Dr. Boyd and what he did to get through that. How can that apply to what I'm doing today?
Right. Well, and probably helps with that gratitude element, right? It particularly if you learn from somebody. Look, life is tough. Some folks it's tougher than others. Some folks it's just horribly tough. And getting any perspective on what others go through, I think helps you when you have those tough moments. I don't know. Maybe I'm naive in that, but I think it helps because it can give you that gratitude to know you're not alone. If nothing else, you're not alone.
I agree. And I think that's the key. It's like some people, when you share stories, of, hey, here's what somebody went through, they feel like you're marginalizing what they're going through.
Mm-mm.
And what I try to relay is like, no, what I'm doing is sharing with you somebody that, like a buddy of mine, this guy lost both his legs.
Mm-hmm.
Was an elite Kenyan runner. But now he's the world record holder for the marathon as a double amputee. And he would tell you it's the greatest thing that ever happened to him. And so that's what I keep telling people. Like, I can give you hundreds of stories of people I know who went through something horrible, very traumatic. But once they came out on the other side of it, they're all the more better. And that's one of the questions I get asked a lot was, hey, Shay, if you could do it all over again, would you take back getting burned? Would you not walk across the street and warn your neighbors about that Yellow Jackets nest? And I said, if you were to ask me that when I was 13, 18, 22, even probably 27, I'd say absolutely. Why would I endure all these surgeries, years of being bullied, made fun of, excluded from fraternities, all these things because of what happened when I was 8? But now that I'm 48, beautiful wife of 19 years, 5 amazing kids, pretty successful athletics and professionally. Absolutely.
Top 1%, just pretty successful. Just top 1%, just pretty successful.
And I would say, so what did I miss out on? Right? Nothing.
Right.
Did I have to work 3 times as hard as everybody else? Absolutely. But it meant 10 times as much because I had to work so hard for it. Mm-hmm. And that's what, if we really take time to reflect on what we value, it's the things that we had to work the hardest for, right? The things that just fell in our lap. It was kind of cool when it happens. Hey, wow,
sure.
I never saw this. But you don't remember those moments. 2-3 years later, you just missed it. But the things that you worked years for and it turned out, you're like, man, that's incredible. So why do we, if we know that to be true, why do we shy away from hard things? If we know that if we spend years grinding, getting through it, and we're going to be happier as a result of getting through it, why do we shy putting ourselves through that?
I think it's the immediateness of the now. I'm no psychologist, but it's hard now. It's difficult now. That's then. Those good things are then. I can't see then. I'm
right.
But I live now. So I assume, I think, I believe that's a huge. It's probably not the only part of it, but that's a huge part of it. Is just it's hard for us to overcome the now.
Well, and I think a lot of it, again, comes back to when you have the confidence of knowing it will produce something good, right? I think that would change the way that you're going through it. But if it's, oh, man, I don't know if this is going to work, am I wasting my time? Then you probably are. But if you have the certainty that, hey, look, I know it may be years before I see any results, but everything I know to be true says I'm doing the right thing.
Right.
This is going to work. Just like raising kids. If anybody said, before you ever had a kid, here's what it's going to take, we would never have kids. Right? Nobody would ever volunteer to have kids. But man, I mean, when you're knee deep in it years later, you're like, I can't imagine life any other way. I
Right.
can't imagine not doing this. And so, but once you get into it and you realize there's no turning back, and that's part of it too. Like, I'm also a big believer, burn the ships down too. And you can't swim back to safety,
Right.
right? It makes things easier when you don't have a choice of quitting. That's why, like I tell everybody, if you're wanting to do a race, whatever, a trip, share it, tell everybody. Because when you're tempted to quit, you're like, man, how do I go tell everybody I quit? How do I tell everybody I took the easy way out?
People don't want to be a quitter. Yeah.
Right? You're like, oh, I guess I just got to suffer through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's actually a really good piece of, like, what do you want to call it? Tactical advice for folks looking to get motivated. I think, we've talked a lot of mindset. We've talked a lot of, try to embrace this, read about that, have gratitude. Those are good sort of directional imperatives. But what you just said, I think, is a really useful piece of tactical advice. Somebody can grab it and do it. You can do it tomorrow, right? It's part of why I set out an announcement publicly. I'm doing this.
Yes.
You had told me this tactic before, so I got a little edge on listeners. But I wanted to do that here.
Well, let me share with you something just happened this week. I'm also a big believer that even though you're scared to death, everything inside you says, hey, this is probably not a good idea. But there's a good chance you're wrong. Do it anyway. For instance, so I did this Ironman event Sunday in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Immediately after, my knees were so swollen I couldn't hardly move. Because I need a knee surgery that I've put off trying to get through this year. So I've got torn meniscus, my knee, and so I iced it for 2 days straight. And it was so swollen, but I was like, man, I've committed to. So Wednesday I flew to Missoula, Montana. A buddy of mine is running across the entire U.S. He'll be the first person to run from New York to Seattle. And so I told him, I said, look, I'm going to come spend a day with you and run 30 miles. Help you get through the mountains in Montana. And my body said, you can't do this. You can barely walk. How are you going to run 30 miles? And then I kept telling myself, how do I stand him up? I already told him I'll be there. This guy's counting.
Right.
So I showed up. And they dropped a pin and said, hey, meet us out here at this fire road to run. So I flew out there, right, to Missoula, Montana, drove, who knows where. He's got a crew member who's a chiropractor. He's an Eastern medicine person. He goes, how you feeling? I said, well, honestly, we'll see. He goes, what do you mean? So he looked at me and he goes, yeah, it's a little puffy. And he's doing an assessment. He goes, try this. He had this patella tendon strap that you wear right beneath your kneecap.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I think this is going to help you. I said, well, I got nothing to lose. So I put it on. Dude, it was like magic. The swelling went down on my knee. I ran the 30 miles, felt fantastic, held the same pace. And it was funny because now, so I've committed to, in February, to run 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 days. And I've been questioning, how am I going to do that? Because my knee's been swelling up so much.
Right.
But now, after doing this, showing up, and this doctor looking at it on the spot, saying, try this, I think I found my cure. So these
may have an option, yeah.
Yeah, so these next 4 months, I'm going to run with this patella tendon strap. And I think it's going to be what I needed to avoid surgery, at least to get through the race. That's what I'm saying. Like, so sometimes if you just show up, don't get too much in your own head. Just showing up, you're going to surprise yourself. Your body will figure out a way to get you through something. Because trust me, you'll always come up with a million ways not to do something.
Right.
Just come up with 2 or 3 on how. Go with it. Don't question it. Just do it.
Right. So Shay, let me turn a little bit to how the heck you get all this done. You're the chief sales officer of a company. you're father of 5, you're doing Ironman Sunday, long distance running Wednesday. You said upcoming, 7 marathons. How do you make, I'm not going to say find, how do you make time for all that? Plus your daily training, I'm sure you have to do to stay in good physical condition. I mean, how do you make time for all this?
It's like everything in life. We make time for the things that we care about, right? And with that, you got to identify what are things that I can sacrifice, because it does require sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
What are things I'm comfortable sacrificing, and what are things I don't want to sacrifice? So I sacrifice TV. I don't watch TV.
So
Now,
you're
I'll
not up to
watch
date
it.
on Stranger Things and,
Yeah. So, I mean, but I will watch stuff while I'm training. But
Okay.
as far as just sitting down at the end of the day, hey, let's sit down and watch TV and unwind, I don't do it. I can't. On the same token, I'm not going to sacrifice time with my wife and kids,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I do all my training. I get up at 4:30. I can get 2 hours in before everybody else in the house is even awake.
Mm.
But you just find a way to do it. Am I perfect? No, I drop some balls, but I feel like I get it right more times than I get it wrong.
Right.
And thank goodness we can work remotely now. I get a lot of work done on airplanes. Airplanes are
Mm-hmm.
great now. Nobody's bugging me. Nobody's calling me. I'm just cranking away, emailing, setting up appointments. And it's just finding time where there's no wasted time. If I'm sitting in a doctor's office, I bring my laptop. When I'm waiting to see a doctor. If I'm going to the dentist, same kind of thing. So anytime I know there's a chance I'm going to be sitting for 5 minutes, I bring my laptop. When my kids have soccer, I sit out there for their hour and a half soccer practice, working on my laptop, right? And this is time where I see other parents just sitting there talking to each other the whole time. Don't get me wrong, I would love to sit there and chat and hang out with all the other parents. But in order for me to get done what I need to get done, I got to make
Right.
use of every minute I got.
Right.
That's why when people say, I don't have time, I said, look, give me your schedule. I promise I'll find time for it. You may not like it, but we can find the time.
Right.
Right? And it's funny, again, it's one of those things, you start becoming more cognitive of moments you're wasting time. And you have to be very careful because people inadvertently steal time from you. People, hey, can we, let's grab lunch, let's do this. And if there's an agenda like, hey, I need your help, it's business related, somebody's in need, absolutely. But if it's, hey, let's just hang out, I probably can't do that. We'll have to combine that with another time that I have designated as downtime, right?
Right.
And that's what I try to do is put everything together. Like I'm in busy season right now. So if you're wanting just to meet, grab coffee and hang out, I just can't do it. No offense, but
Right.
you know,
Yeah, and that's part of why I phrased it as make time, because I think I'm not the best at using my time. I have an overabundance of idle activities probably in my life compared to somebody like you, but you're it's a good inspiration for those of us who are trying to do more, to be more, to grow more. So, but the point about being willing to say no, I think is really critical. And I'm going to flip that a little bit because you have a long, very successful career in sales and business development. I had some of my early jobs were moderately successful in sales and business development. And one of the things that strikes me about that profession is getting used to, you're saying no to a lot of people. In that profession, you have to be told no a lot and be willing to take it. A lot of rejection in sales and business development. So do you feel like your experiences as a child and your Ironman or both contribute to your success in sales and business development?
I do. I think there's so many things that go into it. We refer to the whole sales process as positive persistent. And so you got to be persistent without being a pest. There's a very fine line. And trust me, there's many times where I know I've stepped over that line, but also when that happens, I apologize. Hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to come across this way.
Right.
I'm just a very upfront kind of person, and I apologize. Once you know me, you'll overlook my tendencies, but I do apologize. But being a competitor also makes me very attractive to sales. Like we know there's a lot of no's, but we see it as a challenge, right? Just like in baseball, if you have a 65% failure rate, you're in Hall of Fame, right? Even a 70% failure rate, you're Hall of Fame material.
Right.
And I think the same could be true in sales. If you've got a high failure rate, but you're selling very expensive services or products, and that's what I did was kind of mapping out what industry do I need to be in to get me here to afford me this kind of lifestyle? What does that look like? I thrive on it, but I also try to take a different approach to sales. I think, I think you'll agree with this, David, especially in healthcare, that if we all agree it's a relationship based industry, then everything you're doing should be reinforcing relationships, not transactional. And I've had so many private equities reach out to me, and their whole MO is activity. You need to be making 100 phone calls, 100 emails a week.
Right.
It's like all you do is piss people off. And I've put it back to them. I said, look, when you had to spend $1 million, did you go look in your spam filter on your email account saying, you know what? This is who I want to trust to spend $1 million with. Or did you say, you know what? I've got 5 trusted advisors that they can guide me on this. They may not know or have it, but they know somebody else that can. So if we all agree that's how we do business, then maybe our activities should reflect that.
Right.
And so that's why I try to spend my time on establishing myself as somebody that hopefully you can trust, somebody that has integrity, but at the end of the day is trying to help you, whether it's something I have or not. I feel like I refer more people than ones I actually sell, but I want to be a resource for somebody because I know at some point they will need what I have.
Right.
And they'll have the confidence and trust. And hey, look, he's helped me on something he got no commission. I trust this guy that he's looking out for me. He's not just trying to make a fast sale.
And I know one man's opinion that goes a long way. I have other sales and business development people I've got relationships with who act the way you do, and I'm going to go to them way more often if I can buy their product or refer them business, because it's not been a transactional one-way street. It's been something where we've built a relationship, and that takes time. And I get that some industries maybe, or even some subsets of an industry may not support that as well. It may be more
right.
Like Tommy Boy, you're selling brake pads or something, right? So.
And I've done that. And I think that's the key, right? Is knowing your space, right? One tactic doesn't work in every industry.
Right.
And it doesn't also mean that, hey, I don't send some cold emails because I have to. If I want to meet new people. But generally what I try to do is find somebody that knows this person to get a warm introduction. Because I know I'm going to be a lot more successful. But I also do things, if I don't know you, I may send you a copy of my book to kind of break in. I may handwrite you a letter. There's things that I will do to kind of establish myself so that hopefully by the time we meet, you have some familiarity with who I am and what I stand for. Because I really do believe at the end of the day, people do business with people they like, know, and trust.
Right.
And that's why I believe if you use social media correctly, which I guess that's up to interpretation, but if you try to put out there things that reinforce who you are, like for me, it's, hey, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a man of faith, here's what I believe in, people will know that before they ever meet me and say, hey, look, I'm willing to meet with this guy because I know his values are in alignment with mine.
Right. Right. And so, there's no one tactic for all industries, you said, but is there advice you can give to a young sales or business development person who might listen to this as they're starting in their career, the first few years of their career? if they're in that job that's demanding 100 calls a day or a week or whatever, how do they deal with that? I mean, you can't just up and quit, I assume, or maybe your advice is find a better organization. I mean, what would your advice to somebody like that be who might be listening?
So I'd say number one, if you're in that industry and they have people there that have been successful doing that, right? It's not just them telling you, it's, hey, here's Mary, here's Bob, they've done this, look at them. Go spend time with them. Say, hey, Mary, hey, Bob, can I spend a couple of days shadowing you? Like, I would love to learn, what is your pitch? Can I see some of the emails you've sent people? I've done that a lot. Maybe it's you're not writing a good email.
Right.
But just picking their brain on what are they doing. Hey, can I tag along for one of your meetings? I'll pay for the lunch. Let me come and hear what these people are saying to their prospective clients. But that's what it's like everything, right? You learn from those who have been successful. So whatever you can do to spend time with them, figure it out. Don't recreate the wheel. But in doing that, also be conscious of your personal style. Because one person's demeanor and how they approach people on the phone may conflict with who you are.
Right.
And so don't forget who you are. Like, I'm a person that borders oversharing. And if you're not a very personal person, I don't recommend that. It's got to be in alignment with who you are and what you stand for.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Shay, you said this is your busy time, so I want to respect that, and we'll kind of wrap it up here. But a lot of good things to keep in mind for people out there, inspirational items, some tactical items. So I hope folks have listened to the end here. But where can they find, is your book on Amazon? Where can they find you, your book, more information about what you got going on?
Sure. I appreciate that. So number one, I do speaking. So if people want me to speak to their team or to their organization or a conference, the best way to find me is on my website, and that's Shay, Shay, Eskew, ESKEW.com. You will find a link there, or you can go straight to Amazon for my book, What the Fire Ignited. You can also find me on LinkedIn as at Shay Eskew. I think Instagram, it's Mr. Shay, and then the phonetic spelling, SQ. But, in closing, though, David, I just want to encourage your audience, take some risks. Say, hey, you know what? Before the end of the year, I'm going to sign up to do something I've never done before. I don't care what it is, whether it's a garden or you're going to sign up and do a 50-mile hike. Do something that scares the crap out of you, but you've always wanted to do it. And then once you sign up, share it with everybody out there and say, hey, help me. What advice do you have? I want to do this. And you will be amazed how many people go out of their way to make you successful. Because what I found is so many people are scared to do it themselves, but they want to live vicariously through you. And share that with them. Give them that opportunity to experience their dreams through you, right? They can support you to help you be successful.
Right. Well, Shay, thank you again. It's been great talking with you. First ever guest on the No Bad Questions podcast. We'll see everybody out there next time, and I'll see you someplace out there in the healthcare circles. So thanks, Shay.
Yes, sir. Thanks, man.